Hello everyone, welcome to our talk on Justinian's GAAvernor, Robust Distributed Learning with Gradient Aggregation Agent. I'm Xudong from Fudan University. The storyboard starts with our Justinian, an imaginary Byzantine emperor with modern thoughts and somehow deep learning knowledge. He wants to develop an enemy detector for his palace. By design, the enemy detector is a deep learning model which does binary classification between enemies and friends, keeps the enemies out, lets the friends in. Yet, he lacks enough samples for training the detector. Luckily, Justinian hears about distributed learning before, so he finds 3 of his generals. They copy the initial detector from him. Later, they send to the borderlands for training the detectors locally on more real-world cases. Every 10 days, the generals are required to come back to the palace, report a model update, as known as a gradient, to the emperor. The emperor aggregates them into a global update. With it, the emperor then updates his own enemy detector. Finally, he lets the generals copy the latest parameters and sends them out for further local training. Please attention, the story will branch here with different technical options for gradient aggregation. In the first branch, Justinian may choose the most naive approach, simply taking average or weighted average over the gradients reported by each general in a coordinate-wise manner. Ideally, after rounds of aggregation by average, the story will come to a good ending, where Justinian finally has an effective enemy detector for his palace. However, it only happens when all his generals are guaranteed to be loyal. Or otherwise, if only one of his generals is somehow a traitor, then the traitor can always bring back some noisy or random updates for him. It compromises the learning process of Justinian's detector and may cause it to fail to learn anything useful or mistake enemies as friends when it is deployed. Later, Byzantine is under fire. The story may be a little bit different, and Justinian will live a little bit safer life if he has read some existing literature on robust distributed learning. The mainstream technical choices for defending this kind of Byzantine attacks are in general based on the idea of majority voting among the reported gradients. So for example, if we consider the gradients as points in a high-dimensional space, Chrome in 2017 is designed to eliminate the gradients that are the least similar to the majority. Such an idea can also be implemented mathematically by computing the geometric median of the gradients. The other branch of defenses, like Boolean in 2018, use a coordinate-wise operation by doing elimination of abnormal scalar values and computing median per coordinate of the gradient. It can provide a final grand defense but bring a little bit higher computational cost. The introduced majority voting principle in distributed learning is brilliant. It in most cases helps defend against Byzantine attacks when the number of traitors is less than half, because the voting usually eliminates the malicious minority. This brings our emperor an effective enemy detector and happy ending. However, the world can be more malicious than Justinian expects. What if 2 of the 3 generals betray him and report malicious gradients together? Then the majority voting system will vote for the traitors. The detector then learns falsely, and the Byzantine again is doomed to be devastated. If we go back to our real world, the malicious majority is likely to happen in distributed learning systems deployed in open networks, such as the booming federated learning paradigm where each phone users are playing the role of the generals. What if an attacker controls a flood of bots, as in the DDoS attacks, and finds his or her way into the distributed learning process? Then the innocent users and the service providers could be under fire. Under this background, we recommend Justinian to try our proposed gradient aggregation agent, or called GAA, in order to be safer in more situations. In general, GAA is a learnable agent, or we call a GAAvernor, against the Byzantine attacks. As the term agent suggests, GAA works within the reinforcement learning framework. During the whole distributed learning process, GAA learns to assign credits to each general and use the credits as the weights for the gradient aggregation. For example, initially, when Justinian first calls his 3 generals, GA puts 1/3 credits on each one of them. And in the next few rounds, GA will evaluate loyalty from the upcoming behaviors. GA is expected to decrease the credit on the 2 hidden traitors to 0.01, for example, and in the meantime increase the credit on the loyal one to almost 1. So how to bring this idea to reality? We propose the following on-air settings as a so-called Byzantine game for GA and design a novel learning algorithm to solve it. So first, the action. GA's action gets inspirations from the gradient aggregation rule by weighted average. We call the weight coefficient for each gradient the credit for the corresponding general. As a result, when there are 3 generals, the action space of GAA is a 2-dimensional simplex, just as the triangular region here shows. So with an action alpha, GA uses it as a weight and computes the global update by multiplying each credit with the corresponding gradient and summing it to get the global update. Next, the state and the policy network. GA uses the illustrated, fully connected neural network as its policy network, but we can try many different technical choices. Basically, a policy network takes the current state as input and outputs the predicted optimal action. Here the state is mainly assembled from the reported gradients by the generals and the current parameters of the global detector. These two are also important reference information in existing robust aggregation rules like Chrome and Boolean. Besides, the rest parts of the state representation include the previous credits, which will later enable GA to update the policy network with backpropagation, and the loss on a Quasi-Validation set, which we introduce in the next slide. The state representation is then forwarded through a linear layer, an average pooling layer, and a softmax layer. Finally, it gives the current estimated credits on each general. To achieve stronger robustness, GA does require a little bit auxiliary information to get rewards as guidance for its policy learning. This is provided by a so-called Quasi-Validation set, or we call it a QE set. It is defined to be a small set of data samples that are not that different from the local training samples made by the generals. So in theory, we characterize the not that different by the finiteness of the KL divergence between the QV set and the general's training set. And we proved that a smaller divergence means a better defense capability of GA. While in practice, for classical distributed learning systems in closed networks, one can use the existing validation set provided by the learning task or its subset as the working QV set. For federated learning systems, where the local training data is private, one may usually find about 10 samples from some public datasets in a similar application domain is enough as the proper QV set. So with the QV set, we set the reward of GA as the relative change of loss on the QV set before and after the parameters are updated. And correspondingly, the final learning objective of GA is the cumulative reward calculated in each T round of the training process. As an overview, the full specification of the Byzantine game is shown in the diagram here. In summary, GA takes in the state, estimates the current credits, updates the underlying model, so for example the enemy detector of Justinian, and evaluates the rewards for the taken action based on the QV set, and finally optimizes its policy network by maximizing the cumulative reward. Due to the inclusion of the previous credits in the state representation, the whole system is differentiable, as the computational graph here shows. It means that GA is able to learn simultaneously with the underlying learning model via the classical backpropagation algorithm. In the end, Justinian finds his new governor is very effective and efficient. It not only helps defend against the Byzantine attacks with a wide range of attacker ratios, but also brings robustness in many different application domains, including image classification, sentiment analysis, and healthcare-related tasks. And moreover, we also evaluate the robustness of GA in many more challenging attack scenarios. For example, in a randomized attack, All but one generals randomly change its role between loyalty and betraying. In a pretense attack, the traitors pretend to be loyal until a certain training round. In adaptive attacks, the traitors try to generate faulty gradients based on his partial knowledge about the QE set. In most cases, GA still provides desirable defenses, as extensive experimenting on paper shows. Yet, we think GA can be limited when the QV set is fully known by the traitor. Luckily, such a situation may be avoided by the randomness in preparing the QV set or by a multi-version scheme for the QV set. It may be an interesting direction to study in the future work. Thank you for your audience. For more details, feel free to read our paper and drop me questions at the QA part.